Hi,
Welcome, Angela.
You are our first candidate to be interviewed. So
excellent.
Thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed. Angela, you've got the first 5 minutes or so to give us a pitch on why you want to be deputy leader and what you would do to support disabled people in that role.
Well, the reason I want to be deputy leader, and thanks so much for giving me this opportunity to speak to your members, is because I think Labour needs to be part of every community. I want to blow open the doors of our democratic structures, and in Unison I was part of that revolution that changed the union from a servicing model where we would be quite transactional into a real organising union, which made us the largest union in the United Kingdom, and we grew when other unions were in decline because we brought people on board. We've got our self-organised groups and we really tried to be the change we wanted to see. And I think the role of deputy leader is about energising our movement, growing our movement and making it inclusive. And it's also what I've done as a shadow cabinet member. I've been inclusive both within the political strands of our movement, but also in developing our national education service, which I'm so proud of. And Disability Labour helped me in making sure that not only was we looking at education in an inclusive sense, but also looking at it to make sure that every single person felt they had a place and their needs were met as part of our national education service. And I was really proud of doing that work, and I want to take it into government. I don't want to develop these policies and develop these ideas with you and not be able to then make the positive changes that we need to see, not just within our political movement, but in society in general. And I don't just speak from my own personal experience. I talk about, I looked after my mum. I was my mum's main carer from the age of 10 because my mum's had significant mental health problems ever since I was young. My two sons, one's got a physical disability, he's registered blind, and one's got ADHD, and I saw the differences between neurodiversity and mental health problems as opposed to a physical health problem and the barriers that people face. And I just want to make the world a much kinder, more inclusive place, and it starts with our own party.
Okay, thank you for that, Angela. Right, we've got a series of 10 questions for you. I'm going to do the first 5 and then I'm going to pass over to Kathy to do the second 5. I don't know if you're aware that many disabled members have been unable to participate in their CLP hustings because they couldn't attend meetings in person. Will you guarantee to ensure that disabled members or others who can't attend Labour Party meetings because of caring responsibilities and things like that are able to access either postal or proxy votes for future CLP meetings and indeed nomination meetings at all levels of the party?
Absolutely. I think we should have more use of technology and more accessibility across all levels of our party. And I'm really proud of the work that Jonathan Fletcher had done in founding Project 125, who is a member of my constituency and a good friend of mine, and really just trying to make sure that people can attend, whether that's through disability or whether that's because they've got carers' responsibility. Many people are shut out of our democratic processes. So not only do I want to use technology and make our CLPs and all of our structures more inclusive, but I want that fund that we've got currently that a lot of people don't know about, I want to put more resources into that. And I'm a true believer in hard targets on these things, because as a woman who is exceptionally good at what I do, I only got to be an MP because we had all women shortlists. So I want to see our people, our fantastic candidates with disabilities, being given all the help they need in order to stand for all different positions in our movement, but also take part in our meetings. And you know what, we're a movement, not a meeting, and I'd really like to see that reflected in what we do. So whether that's accessibility, our conferences or venues where we have hustings and things like that, I think it's really important. And as a mother of a blind child who's 11, I see every single day the frustrations of him not being able to participate, because he's reminded every day of what he can't do rather than what he can do. And I'd love to see a culture in our movement that reminds people how special and amazing they are, instead of reminding them that the world is not the way it should be for them.
Yeah. One of the issues in particular for these, indeed the leadership elections, is that we can't get either postal or proxy votes if we can't get to the meeting. And it seems to me that within that, the party is breaching the Equality Act. What's your take on that one?
There's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be able to do that. You know, the NEC elections is an electronic ballot. I don't see why we can't enable people to participate and have proxy voting. And we've only just got proxy voting for women who have had children as members of Parliament. I mean, we couldn't even get maternity leave. It's so backwards in not being able to provide that support. I find it incredibly frustrating. We have to not only do what I think is what we set up the Equalities Act for in the Labour movement, but we have to go further than that. We have to pioneer the new technologies, the new ways of working, so that actually we can be at the top of our game and prove that the public sector and everyone else should follow us, because we're the Labour Party. It should be what we live and breathe every single day, and it's very frustrating that we can't at the moment. And you'd have my absolute assurances as the deputy leader that I will practice what I preach, because I want my son to grow up in a world that celebrates the amazing miracle that he is, and not make him feel that he can't participate. And I'm a tiger mum.
Thank you, Angela. Just moving on to issues around benefits at the moment. Do you believe that when Labour gets back into government that we need to stop all the frequent face-to-face interviews for ESA and PIP?
100%. My constituency is a pilot area for universal credit. It's been awful, absolutely devastating. And I talked before about my mum. I'm my mum's main carer, and you know, my mum's been in and out of hospital needing psychiatric treatment because of the way she's been treated by the benefit system, because she's never been well, and actually the way people are treated at the moment is making people feel worse and not helping them. And in fact, people are dying as a result of the way our benefit system is treating people. We set up the welfare state because we saw the value in everyone, and most people's disabilities are acquired through their lifetime, often through occupational hazards, etc. So I think we have an absolute duty to ensure that our welfare system is about the welfare. I wouldn't want my mum, dad or any other relative to be treated the way our system treats people at the moment, and I think a society is judged by how we treat everybody, and certainly our most vulnerable, and we're an absolute disgrace at the moment, and we've got to keep fighting that. I was in the shadow DWP team, I was shadow pensions minister, and I fought with Debbie Abrams, my neighbouring MP, and others, and I think we've got to continue to hold the Tories to account for their terrible behaviour now, but then have a platform which inspires and tells people that they're worth it and that we're there to support them. Because when you give people with a disability the means to help themselves, they are just as productive as anyone else. It's just that the world that we live in at the moment prohibits people from reaching their full potential.
Thank you. You touched on the whole issue of the Tory ministers who brought in this welfare system. Do you think those ministers should be held to account, and in what way?
I really do. Ian Duncan Smith is absolutely vile. I was so upset that we didn't manage to get rid of him at this general election. I went there and campaigned personally to try and get rid of him. And at one point, he even acknowledged himself that some of the stuff that he put in line had really damaged the system. But they haven't been held to account. Actually, they've gone to the courts and have been, legally filed against, and yet they're still in post and they're still able to do what they do. So I do think they should be held to account, and when you see me at the dispatch box, I have been pointing in their face and holding them to account, because I am a tiger mum and I care about the people that I'm there to represent. And I was a home care worker before I came into Parliament, and I've seen that the most important thing in life is people, and that's what I came into politics for. And I think that it's our job and obligation to fight for those people and to hold these ministers to account. I think they get away with far too much at the moment, and actually Ian Duncan-Smith should have been sacked along with all those other ministers that were ruled against in the courts.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Again, focusing still a little bit on the benefits issue, you will be aware of how much extra money disabled people actually need each month to have the same quality of life as somebody who is temporarily able-bodied. What would you do in government to try and bridge that gap? Because it's a significant one.
It really is. And if I take the National Education Service, for example, if you look at our manifesto, which I'm really proud of the work we did on that, it was around making sure that when we assess young people for special educational need and disability, we tell them what they need, but then we never supplied the funding for it. So I felt that the funding should be absolutely statutory. So if you were assessed as having a particular need, that it shouldn't be a question of there's a limit and that's it. Actually, if we're really positive about inclusive education, we had to provide that funding regardless. And I felt that needed to be locked in, and I pushed for that in our manifesto. And we had over 700 million additional funding to ensure that every child with special educational needs got that. So I put my money where our mouth was, and the money that we were spending on that was so crucial to give young people that start in life, but it's all the way throughout life. So we've got to make sure that actually, I think public buildings, we started it with the Equalities Act, but it was never really finished. But we've got to make sure that employment, our public spaces, our public buildings, I mean, you know the drop curbs and everything, and most of it is dreadful. Even getting around in a wheelchair is awful. And if you've got neurodiversity issues, it's even worse. So we've really got to invest, like we would do in trains or buses. We've got to invest in accessibility to make sure that the world we live in, it shouldn't be about, oh, well, you're separated out because you've got a disability. You should be able to walk around or go about your daily life or do what you're doing with your disability without people really being able to see it. And that's why I'm such a big advocate for inclusion. My son goes to a mainstream school. I was told not to do that he'd never survive in a mainstream setting, but I felt it was so important, not just for him, but for the young people around him, to see disability as a day-to-day occurrence and not to see it as something that's a problem that has to be separated, but actually see it and celebrate Charlie for who he is and what his abilities are and not his disabilities. And I'd like to see our structures to enable that to happen and that investment to be put in place to help that. And that means with the benefits system as well. So again, you know, I bought my son a magnifier. It cost me £900 just for a magnifier because they put a right load of money on top of it. Any support that Charlie needs, you times it by 10 and you might come up with the money for it, because the technology, as soon as they know it's something that you need to live your life, you end up paying more for it. But the benefit system doesn't give him anywhere near enough for him to access the support he needs.
Okay, thank you. And this is my last question, which again you slightly touched on before, but I just want to go back to it, which is that I'm sure you know that many disabled candidates did not make the long list for the Euro elections, or indeed long lists for MP selections, let alone the short list. What system would you like to see to guarantee that disabled candidates get onto short lists?
Well, I thought Project 125 was really crucial in starting that conversation. I want the hard targets. I want us to say that we will have 30-40% of our candidates will have a disability, whether they openly say it or not. Actually, when somebody identifies on the application, I think we have to make sure that we do push for that. I'm sick of being told that we'll try and achieve, because then we're waiting 200-300 years at best if we're lucky. We've seen what the women's movement has gone through, and we still haven't got equality as women. So people with disabilities are way behind that. I'd like to see some real hard targets in our movement that makes us do that. And you know, we've got Kathy on the line, and she knows through Unison self-organised groups, it's not perfect, but it does mean that we have voices there that challenge the organisation all the time at every level. And I think that the Labour Party is way behind on that, and we need to really push ahead on making sure that the voices are heard, but then they've got the power behind them to make sure that we do something about it. Hard targets is the word for me, hard targets.
Thank you, Angela. And I'm going to hand over to Kathy now, because she's got the next few questions, because I actually need to shut the door of the room I'm in, where you've got some noise.
Yeah, and I'm just answering. My assistant's dog is, he's in surgery.
Oh, no.
So I just, yeah, if you hold on just a second.
Yeah, please do.
Hello. Hi. I'm in the midst of a conference call. Have you heard from the vet at all? Oh, he's gone. I guess he hadn't.
Kathy, if you need,
No, it's just him. My husband checking in.
All right, okay.
To find out how I was. That's fine.
We've got a buddy dog.
Oh, have you?
Do you?
Yeah, so my buddy dog's called Luna.
Oh, lovely.
Oh,
yeah.
My dog.
What is she? What sort of dog?
She's a golden retriever.
Oh, lovely.
And I'm a trainer for guide dogs.
Are you? Wow.
So I'm a boarder, yeah. So I'm trained in how to, when they go from puppy school.
Yes.
And then they
You're
train
a puppy
them.
parent.
Yeah. So I'm a boarder.
That's excellent. I mean, Rex, poor thing. I found a small lump, and they've taken it and found that there's cancer cells. Oh. So he's in having the tumor removed.
How old is he?
He's 7.
Okay.
So he's quite young, and so I think we got it early, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. They're so much more than an assistance dog. They become part of the family, don't they?
Yeah, and you feel the same way about them. I feel even when he's not with me, yeah. I feel sort of like I've had my arm removed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, sorry. If we get back to the questioning, standing for office, and that's either councillors or any office, is prohibitively expensive for many disabled people. Would you champion a bursary scheme which would cover all reasonable adjustments for disabled candidates, no matter whether they're standing at a local or national level?
Yes, I think the government should statutory do this. So I would build on the Equalities Act to make sure that there's an absolute imperative duty to ensure that anyone that wants to stand for public office is not prohibited from doing that, and that the funding is available and the accessibility is there to ensure that people can stand for public office. It's the only way we're going to change the way public services work at the moment, is by making sure that those barriers are removed. So it's not just so much about a bursary for me, it's an absolute legal statutory duty for them to make sure that all elements of government is accessible to all people, because that's what public service is about. It's meant to be for all members of the public and not just those that are ably bodied. So we have to break down those barriers. So I would push for more statutory duties if I was in government to make sure that happens. And in the meantime, I would push that the Labour Party expands its funds that it currently makes available, because we ran out of funds at the general election, and we need to make sure that the funds are there. There's no question of that for me. You have to put your money where your mouth is and provide that service.
I think just an addendum question to that, or an extra one, that currently anybody who's standing as a local councillor in their locality, whether it's for the borough or for a county council position, if they're on any kind of benefit, unfortunately, I'm from an area that has universal credit, are penalized if they get allowances. How would you try to challenge that thing that stands in the way of people even being able to participate because all allowances, instead of being put aside from any calculations with universal credit, how would you challenge that system now?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in universal credit. I think it's an awful system. I'd scrap it. But I also think that it misunderstands what the the benefits system is and the welfare. At the moment, it's still not enough for people with disability. If you need to, like, that's why I interpreted for people who were deaf, because they weren't the interpreters and there wasn't the excess there. So any funds that you get through your disability living allowance should not be impaired, or any universal credit should not be impaired by an allowance that you get for your public service, because the allowance is there to help you do your public service. So it's incompatible to take that into account with what benefits people receive as well. So I wouldn't make it means tested on that anyway. I think it should be completely excluded from that. But I don't believe in universal credit or PIP or ATOS or any other vile regime that this government has introduced to try and persecute people with disabilities.
That leads wonderfully on to my next question, which is, will you support demands from Disabled People's Movement and ROFA, Reclaiming Our Futures Alliance, for the National Independent Living Service and enshrining the UN CRPD Article 19 into UK law?
Yes, and I pushed for the rights of a child, the UN rights of a child, to be included in our manifesto for our National Education Service, to ensure that that was enshrined as well, because we kind of know that Labour's not the best in the world at the moment, and we have to start where we mean to go on, and that's in our own organisation. So I think we've got to make sure the government does all of those things. We've got to put that in power when we're in government, but I'd like to make our organisation be the forefront of these things, so that we're showing the world what we can do. It's the absolute minimum what we should do. In fact, I won't just support it, I promise you I will be there in physical being with you on any demonstration or anything else. I will be part of your movement, not an add-on or a supporter. I will be part of you in taking your battle forward. You will always have a friend in me to make sure that that happens, because our country needs that. My child has got so much to offer. And our country needs to make sure that everybody, regardless of their disability, is reaching their full potential, because otherwise we're all worse off as a result of it.
Just putting in a plug for disability labor, you know, as a carer, you can actually join our organization. So if you haven't, please do.
Yes, I know.
I'll send you the website.
And do you know, as we're plugging, I would encourage everybody to join Disability Labour and to support what you're doing. We all have an obligation. It's not up to one person to do it. If we're a carer or we have a disability, and I like our self-organised groups in Unison for that, because you don't have to have a label in Unison. You can self-identify, and I think that's so important, and letting people be part of that movement and who want to see a more diverse society. Then I think if you want that and you want to be part of that, then get involved.
Fantastic, thank you. How would you engage with disabled members so you can understand the variety of injustices being experienced by disabled people and ensure their voices are heard and all Labour Party policies are equality impact assessed? As many of the non-Labour run councils have decided not to actually act on the equality impact assessments because they're not statutory.
Well, I would work with your group to ensure that we have within the Labour Party structures that we have representation from disability Labour at every single strand of our party movement. I would write on your behalf to every local authority in the country as your deputy leader to ask them to adopt the principles and certainly the 12 pledges that you put forward for us, but also expand that for public duty and try and start a campaign with you to get councils to see that, embarrass those councils that won't do it, but use my platform as deputy leader to really push forward and push ahead on that. We don't have to wait until we're in government. Like you say, we're empowering a lot of councils, but where we're not in power in those councils, we can embarrass them if they don't sign up to what I consider to be the principles of humanity. And we can write to those councils, and I'll work with you to ensure that we do that piece of work now so that we can make those improvements today.
Thank you. I've got two more. 9 is many disabled people, especially those with neurodiverse conditions, are adversely impacted within the current dysfunctional party complaint system. This applies to those who make complaints and have complaints made against them. Will you work with disabled members to ensure they can be properly supported by advocates?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right to acknowledge that our current procedures are dysfunctional. They are in a number of different ways, and people have to have confidence that the system that we have in place is inclusive and treats people fairly and with respect. That's what our values are as a movement, and we don't do that at the moment, whether you're the accused or whether you're somebody who is accusing because of you've been through that. We have to have a process that's quick, that gives people opportunity and that gives people that accessibility to participate. And we are not disability aware as an organisation at the moment, and by involving disability Labour, by involving those organisations that currently work like Mind and others that help transform our society now, I think we'll be able to do a lot more to make our party more accessible, and I absolutely pledge to work with you to make sure that happens.
Okay, and finally, do you also accept any Do you also accept that all outstanding complaints should be investigated and responses sent to both sides as soon as possible?
Absolutely, and in fact I would say that most cases should be dealt with within a very quick time frame, and we should have a responsibility to do that, because it only adds further upset to people if things carry on for a long time, and there's no reason for that. We should be putting resources in to make sure we deal with things, because otherwise it adds on to the upset and the trauma that people face. And again, if you've got a disability, especially a neurodiversity disability, then that's just going to make that worse. So that in itself is a discrimination, and therefore we've got to make sure that our processes are accessible, and part of that is about being swift and dealing with them. For far too long people are left not knowing. Part of it is about informing people and giving them the chance to be part of that process and empowered. And one of the first things I want to do as a trade unionist, my values are to make sure that we have fair processes, and I think that we really struggle with that as an organisation. And since we've grown as well, to be fair to our staff who do an amazing job, but our organisation has grown massively since Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party, and we haven't kept up with that. We have to invest more in making sure that our system's fit for purpose, and at the moment it isn't, and therefore we're not helping our staff. And I really want to help our staff do a good job and help our activists to volunteer and feel good about being part of our great movement.
Well, thank you for that. And I'll turn over to Fran for her final things. And is there anything you want to ask us?
What are you looking for in the role of deputy leader? What would you think would be quite crucial for me to take on board with what you and your members are wanting from their deputy leader?
I think one particular issue that people are flagging up is we still haven't got the disability section put into place.
Mm-hmm.
I think, there's been some movement partly on the women's section, but all we've got at the moment is a standalone conference and nothing else. I know there's a movement to put the BAME section into place as well, but disability seems to be way down the end of the list, and I think that's extremely disappointing, if not anger-making from my perspective. People are really, really angry that we're getting left behind. And also, when I saw the draft rules in the party rule book, there was not a single mention of reasonable adjustments. Now, I presume, therefore, that was written by somebody who is not disabled.
Yeah, quite. Well, I pledged to meet with you within the first 4 weeks of being in office as deputy leader to go through some of these issues and take them forward. So I promised to meet with you within the first 4 weeks if I was elected to ensure I take that forward as a priority.
Terrific, thank you. I think additionally to that, I don't know if you're aware or if you have it, but when I was on the Unison National Disabled Members Committee, Unison produced a fantastic guide to reasonable adjustments. Yeah. Do you have a copy of that?
I do have a copy of it. In fact, when I was on Unison's NEC, we were instrumental in taking forward. In fact, we wouldn't have had the Equalities Act if it wasn't for Unison Disabled Members Self-Organisation. You're crucial in that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you had it, because if you didn't, I have a copy.
I have a copy.
Excellent. You probably have enough connections to the Disabled Members Committee at this point anyway. One of the questions that I'm going to kind of just pop and ask is that with the UK-wide difficulty with mental health organizations and treatment, how would you support people within the communities, or how would you suggest that we support people in communities to just be aware of the difficulties people face with mental health issues?
There's a couple of things really. One that I really championed at the last manifesto was a wellbeing manifesto, and I think that talks about our story as an organisation. So everything that we did in every area of government should be about wellbeing, and about how does that encourage the wellbeing of our communities, of everybody in our communities. And then the National Education Service from cradle to grave for me again was about inclusiveness, about inclusion. I think the best way we can help everyone in society is by, instead of trying to departmentalise and box people off, is trying to give people the opportunity to celebrate who they are, instead of saying, oh, well, you're part of the LGBT community, so you're this. You're part of the disability community, so you're this. You're from the BAME community, you're that. It's actually, we are a community, and we all have needs, and our needs deserve to be met, and about trying to break down those barriers. So whilst we recognise that people will need additional support, is our baseline should be better than what it is, and we don't have that at the moment. So when we look at our public infrastructure, when we look at our policies going forward, when we look at our statutory duties, when we look where power lies in communities and in organisations like ours, we have to have those hard targets to ensure that everyone's around that table and making a contribution, so that their voices are heard, they've got power behind their voice, and we make a real difference. And it will pay off by doing that, because it's not about just helping that one person, it helps society, because we can all benefit from the contribution that people make.
I'm going to be cheeky, and I operate on a don't ask, don't get policy.
That's what my son does.
Yeah, well, I've learned that. I was the senior child, so the oldest. So my thing is don't ask, don't get. Exactly. I've been trained not only being a counselor and being mental health aware, and having my own lived experience. I've also trained as an instructor for mental health first aid. would you be able to champion the idea of mental health first aid for both MPs and councillors? Because at this stage, I believe that being a councillor, that all councillors and MPs, because they see constituents, should be trained in mental health first aid so that they can support somebody who comes in who's in serious financial debt and things like that.
I'd be honoured to. And I was the youngest Samaritan in the Northwest, and I've got a level 2 in counselling as well.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
I kind of just do it inherently because I was my mum's carer. So it kind of comes intuitively to me, because as a child, I've never known anything but to look after people. It's kind of what makes me feel good about myself, is being able to do that. But I also recognise that we are not aware. So I also trained all my staff on the dementia awareness training that Age Concern offer, so that all of my staff are aware of dementia and how that can people need support with that. And I think the same with mental health. All my staff have been trained by Mind. I did a whole training course to ensure that all my staff are trained so that they can support people who need my advice, and I think we should roll that out 100% and make sure that all people who are working in a public facing role have that level of awareness, because again, it's about disability awareness, and I'd like to see it as ability awareness. Yes. So that people can enable people to express themselves and have that space where they can be themselves.
And what would you do with the disability confidence scheme?
Well,
yeah, okay, that says it all right there.
I think you know where I am there.
Yep, don't have to answer that one.
It's on my face.
We would be glad to work with you. Fran is also an instructor, and we've trained many mental health first aiders, so we would be more than happy to help work with putting that into place.
And I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that.
Thank you, Angela.
Look,
no problem.
Almost 3/4 of an hour of your time, and that's
okay.
Busy MP. You need to get back on those green benches and go get those Tories.
Exactly. But thank you so much. And, Kathy, I hope your dog's okay, because I know how upsetting that can be. And, and thank you so much for listening to me. And no matter what happens, I will always be a friend and will champion, whether it's in my shadow education role as an MP or whatever, I will be there at your side to make sure we take these issues forward.
Thank you, Angela, and all the best to you and to the team that will be dealing with the Tories from now on. Yeah. I have no doubt that you will stick it to them as necessary.
I promise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.